um, in different places, demonstrating in front of the courthouse, etc. Well, I thought it was time, you know, my time was up, and I had been here a week, and then several of the people said, well, you know, we really need you to stay here a little longer. There's a lot to do. So I said, okay, I'll postpone my trip, and I'll stay another week. Well, they were integrating churches. And we said, well, you know, we've tried to integrate the Baptist church and the Methodist church, but we haven't got anyone around to integrate the Episcopal church. We need a black Episcopalian. And I was a black Episcopalian. So they said, well, okay, you're it. So the time arrived, and they took me to the church, and guess what? I was able to get in. And that made the news, the Times. A New York person integrates the local Episcopal church. Well, when I tried to go back the next week, I couldn't get it, but I didn't get arrested. So there were several activities that I was involved with, and I ended up not going to Mexico. I stayed the entire summer working in the movement, and then I left and went back to teach. During that time, of course, Charles Sherrod, who was Shirley Sherrod's husband, not at that time, but he asked me to fundraise and to try to get food, clothing, books, etc. for Albany, Georgia folks and around the surrounding areas, because people were losing their jobs. They were losing their jobs because they tried to vote. They were losing their jobs because they demonstrated. They were thrown in jail, etc. So that's what I did. I embarked on that. And one of the big fundraising events that I had at that time, a young man named Bob Moses was my keynote speaker. And at that time, he said, you know, we really need you in Mississippi. So we have a literacy project. And since you're a teacher, and you've already been working with SNCC, we think you need to come to Mississippi. I said, well, you know, I really hadn't planned on doing that. And, but he kind of kept asking me. And that spring of 1963, I was working in the New York SNCC office, Friends of SNCC, and working with the organizers for the March on Washington, which was going to take place in August. And I was watching the news, and I saw what was happening in Birmingham. People were getting hosed on, dogs were out, our folks were demonstrating and trying to vote, trying to register to vote. All these fire hoses, these dogs jumping on them. And at that time, I said to myself, well, the least I can do is go to Mississippi and teach for a year. I was asked to do it for a year. And then I ended up staying in Mississippi for 9 years, working on in many, many different projects, which we'll talk about later.
Well, I'm a little different story. I was already here in Atlanta in 1960. I'd already graduated from Agnes Scott and had gone several places. And when I was at Agnes Scott, I was involved in a group called the United States National Student Association, which was a group of college students, governments from all over the country. And so I had gone to, they had national meetings every summer in the Midwest, so the students from all over could come. And I had gone, I guess, my freshman year at Agnes Scott, and I had a black roommate from Xavier College, and Agnes Scott was involved in, I never will forget, I used to have to get permission from home. You got to remember, this is the days of Jim Crow segregation, where everything was segregated by law. So I had to get permission from home, from to say that I could go from Agnes Scott to a meeting at Spelman or at Morehouse or any place where there was going to be an integrated group of students. But anyway, finally, I guess it was in 1959, the National Student Association got a grant from the Field Foundation to set up an office here in Atlanta to get black and white students to meet and talk to each other. There was a stirring that people sensed that students were ready to start doing some changes. Well, a month after I got here, the sit-ins started in my hometown of Greensboro, North Carolina. My parents were born in Ireland, and that's important to know about my own background and where I was coming from, because they didn't understand segregation. You know, they came over, and my sister and I, all four of us, we didn't understand it. And so when I came to Atlanta, and I got involved with February 1st when the sit-in started. By July of 1960, there were 70,000 students that swept across the South in sit-in, starting from those 4 students at A&T College in Greensboro. 70,000, mostly black college students, but a few white students involved. And by February 1st, 1960, I had met Ella Baker, and I had met Julian Bond and Lonnie King and a lot of the students in the Atlanta student movement, Marion Edelman from Spelman, and some others, and they had heard that I was trying to get white students involved, so they asked me to join in with the Atlanta student movement activities. So I got to know all of them, and then all of a sudden Baker said, you know, we're having a meeting of all these sit-inners from all over the country at Shaw University in February of Easter weekend of 1960, and said, you want to go? And so I said, yeah. So I went up to that, so I was at that founding meeting 50 years ago. Then when they came, when the students came back and had a meeting, they formed SNCC, and Marion Barry was elected the first chair. And they asked Ella Baker, who was a lot older, and I wasn't all that much older, but they asked me to be, quote, an adult advisor along with Ella. So, and Julian kids me up, Julian Bond says, we knew that you had a mimeograph machine, and that's why we asked you to be an advisor. And I said, oh, it wasn't my wisdom, no. It was your mimeograph machine and your postage machine. So, and sure enough, Julian ran off copies of the Student Voice in my little office there for some time. But anyway, so I was on the SNCC Executive Committee and for 4 years, and it was, I don't know, in a way it was being in the right place at the right time, and it was 4 years I was with SNCC on that executive committee were among the finest 4 years of my life.